And Utah is the beehive state, right? Isn't
correct?
Interesting.
Correct, yeah.
Little Masonic connection there. I like that.
Oh, there's a lot of little Masonic connections here. I've met a couple of Mormons, and they even said, Joseph Smith borrowed heavily from Freemasonry.
Welcome back to the Craftsmen Online podcast. This is a weekly half-hour program focused on the relevant topics in Freemasonry and the various aspects of the craft. Any opinions, thoughts, or viewpoints that will be shared during this program are that of the individual and do not reflect the official position of any Grand Lodge, appendant, or concordant body from which that member may hail. I'm your host, Brother Michael Arce, Editor-in-Chief of CraftsmenOnline.com, and joining me this week, it seems like it's been a process to get our schedules to work together, but I'm happy to welcome him to the program, Brother Eddie Abdul. Welcome to the podcast, brother.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you here. Brother Abdul is a member of Compact Lodge number 402 in the 4th Manhattan District here in New York State. And he joins us to talk about clandestine masonry. And often when we think of clandestine masons, we have this idea of a gentleman who purchases a Masonic ring, maybe at an estate sale, or comes across to possess an apron or some of our Bibles or standard work and lectures and claims to know our secrets. But in reality, Masonic groups that are clandestine tend to not only mimic our degrees and our ritual and our education, but they also claim some legitimacy or attempt to claim legitimacy in our communities. And that's what Brother Abdul is on to talk about. So you and I connected after you read my article on clandestine masonry for Craftsmen Online, and you wanted to come on the podcast to share your experience. So we're told that, the first place that we're made a Mason is in our heart. And then the second place is within the body of a Masonic Lodge. So I'm sure your experience was the same. You had this burning passion inside of you to become a Freemason, and you reached out and you sought what you thought was a Masonic Lodge. So start there. Tell us your story.
Well, yeah, definitely. I'm like so many other people. My grandfather was a Mason, and that was what made me want to be one. He was a great man, and I saw what he was made of, and I figured, wow, there's something here. So, my first lodge that I attended was actually the lodge I was initiated in. And the first time around. And although it was me not knowing at the time it was irregular, it still had a sacred space feeling to it. There was still something there. And, that was like, wow, it was life-changing.
When men walk into a Masonic Lodge, and there's a lot of trust that's built into this situation, is that a guy off the street who has a family connection. I've heard from a lot of brothers that the first Masonic experience they had was at a funeral for a family member, like their uncle or grandfather who was a Mason, and they saw these men show up with the aprons and do the Masonic ceremony, and they were very moved, and they wanted to pursue what that connection was that these quote unquote strangers had with their loved one. And they go to seek a Masonic Lodge, and you don't really know. I mean, we know that Masonry and Masonic Lodges can be identified by that familiar square and compasses with the letter G, but once you walk inside, what's to tell you that it's, as you put it, regular or irregular? You just don't know. So when you walked into your first lodge building, now kind of knowing what a regular lodge is set up to look like, were there any differences now looking back that you'd be like, yeah, that was a little bit different?
Definitely. There was a big difference. There was, the furniture was different. A lot of our stations, a little difference here and there. Not too much of a big difference, but enough for a trained eye to see. I've had the experience of both sides, so it was definitely really big, as far as I can see, is the difference was in certain areas, and in other areas it was quite similar. So it was just funny.
And I've written about it, and I'm sure you can attest to it, is that, these clandestine lodges are not evil. They're not trying to take something from you. They're trying to present, for lack of a better term, their version of what Freemasonry is. And as the unknown, you just don't know. You're just an innocent person coming in. So Is their petition process similar to ours? Do they do the guarding the West Gate where there's some background checks and an investigation? Or do you literally show up one night, pay them your dues money, and are instantly, thrust into being a full-fledged member of the lodge?
Well, the process that I went through was actually very similar to what I went through with Compact. I petitioned a guy at work, who I found out was to be a Mason. He gave me the petition. Now, here's the funny part. The questions were very similar. On the back of the page was stuff that they wanted me to go to a doctor to see, blood pressure, if I have diabetes, if I had any other bloodborne diseases or anything like that, which I chalked it off to, well, wow, these guys are really thorough.
I guess that's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, they actually, so I was like, okay, they're really thorough. I'm sure my grandfather went through this too, I spoke about it with my dad, and he never was a Mason. He never petitioned a lodge. So as far as he was concerned, it was the same. All those guys, they're real thorough, I did have a formal investigation, except of 3 was actually 2 guys that came, 2 past masters. They asked me my background, but they didn't do like we had the guard in the West Gate in the New York Grand Lodge. I don't think they could afford something like that. So it was just basically they relied on reference from that person that brought you in, that sponsored you.
Gotcha. So it was more of a trust-based confirmation that you can come through. That's interesting, though, about the health records.
Yeah. I'll tell you why. It's because I witnessed a couple of hazing in other lodges.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it was a little crazy. So I guess that was there from whenever they started it or whatever, that they just wanted to make sure that they wouldn't go too far on somebody if they were diabetic or.
Well, at least they look out for that. If anything, to protect the individual, but also, potential lawsuits, because that's the world that we live in today.
Exactly.
You go through their investigation process, their background check, so to speak. And I'm guessing that the petition, you weren't there the night that it may have been read in an open lodge and you were balloted on. And then how are you contacted about your first degree, and what were without giving secrets away, even though, we're protected by obligations with the jurisdictions that we're in under the Grand Lodge of New York State. Clandestine Masonry falls outside of that, where we don't recognize them as practicing Masons in good standing. I don't want to violate any secrets or any potential secrets here, so we'll just be careful about that. But going through that process, what did you experience as far as being contacted for the degrees and being prepared for that?
Okay, so after the investigation, I was told, hey, we'll be in contact shortly with you. I actually received a letter in the mail. And it said something about, okay, come on this date, this night, and bring $50. So I said, okay, I went to my friend and I was like, hey, do I dress nice? How should I dress? I want to present myself well here. And he's like, come in street clothes.
Interesting. So you had never been into a lodge meeting just to see what it looked like? They never showed you the building or anything? Wow. Okay.
No. Nothing. Yeah. So I going in there blind. Now, when I pulled up, there was some disappointment. The building looked shoddy. The sign was well worn, to say the least, and the neighborhood was really sketchy. So like every lodge I've ever seen, was in places they were kept well, So I was a little disappointed, and I was like, okay. See a couple guys outside having a cigarette in tuxedos. I guess I didn't make it to the right place, A lot of it was the same, except for some subtle differences in the ritual. But a lot of it seemed to be the same. Now, when I would snoop around later and read, I realized they gotten their ritual from maybe Duncan's or some other place, But yeah, thank God there was no hazing that night. You know, it was nothing for me that night. But you know, it just didn't. There was something in my stomach that was kind of like, eh.
Just in our ritual in, you know, the Grand Lodge in New York and in other jurisdictions that are recognized, I always wonder what goes through, because it went through mine as the entered apprentice, as the candidate that night, when you show up and you're like, okay, I'm in my dark suit and tie because that's what they told me to come here with. They tell me to bring the remainder of my petition balance. So I bring cash or a check made out to the lodge. Okay. But I've visited the lodge a few times. I've hung out with these guys. I've gotten to meet them as a guest at certain points. Usually a lodge will do like bring a friend night where they'll bring you upstairs and they'll show you around. You're like, okay, that trust, value starts to get built up a little bit. So I wonder, again, without giving away anyone's secrets, is how similar was the first degree that they do? You said they follow Duncan's ritual, which, anybody can get that on Amazon, I think, for like $7 these days. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to, proficiency of ritual in New York State, that's something that we're very proud of, with brothers knowing their parts and not just knowing the words, but understanding the meaning of them. Did you get that feeling, or did you get the feeling that there was just guys reading off of a script, so to speak?
They were guys reading off of a book. Unfortunately, they had little black books, which had all 3 degrees in there and the opening. It was like our standard that we would get. So no one took the time to actually rehearse or anything like that. These were older gentlemen, so memory issues and stuff like that. And some of them, you could tell it was a cold read because they were tripping up on words. So a lot of that was kind of disappointing. It was like, I went in there cold. They didn't have any correlations, never spoke with them, never met them aside from the one that I knew and the 2 brothers that came to investigate me. And so it was just, a little disheartening.
I guess looking back, like, that would be one of the first warning signs, but you just didn't know. You were probably excited because you're like, this is this thing that I want to do, and they're rushing to give me this and I can start it. And so it's just weird because I don't know, and I can totally get that. So you go through the first degree, and from what I've learned from other brothers, and one of the other clandestine bodies that I profile in my article is the International Brotherhood of Freemasonry, which they copy a lot of what we have in recognized lodges, which is, even down to the logo, it's the square and compasses, but instead of the letter G, they put like a funky key symbol in there to replace that. What, if there existed grand group or jurisdiction or body, did this particular lodge that you were a part of, who did they kind of affiliate with or say this is who we mirror? They
said they were under the most worshipful King Solomon.
Oh.
So that was even the petition that I got. And when I got that petition and that logo was on there, the most worshipful King Solomon, and it was just square and compass with the G. It felt very legit, It felt very legit, and I was like, "Oh, wow, okay." So they've been around since the early 1900s.
That's interesting. Okay.
Their first Grand Master was Bishop Jesse B. Thornton.
Okay.
Now, as I did more investigation and I read under somebody who actually kind of dredged up their background, there was supposed to be a brother that was suspended.
Understood. Gotcha. They decided to create their
And what happened was he was suspended indefinitely. Him and Jesse got together, and now we have the most worshipful King Solomon Grand Lodge. And they call themselves Ancient, Free, and Accepted.
Right. Which there are different modes of that being, in New York State, it's free and accepted Masons, and then you have ancient, free, and accepted Masons. And so it does get a little confusing, and especially and I don't want to say put words into it, but it's, they kind of prey on the innocence of people not being able to distinguish the difference.
Exactly.
One of the things I mentioned in the article that I wrote is that they're kind of like the butterfly that mimics the monarch butterfly, where they look like that scary thing that you don't want to eat because if you're a predator, you would die from it. And that's kind of how they're able to survive. So you go through the first degree, and I'm just curious, the process, was it 3 to 4 months later, did you take the second degree, or what was the structure and the timeline to go through to become a Master Mason?
So after the first degree, it actually took almost a year before I got the second. And it wasn't because any proficiency tests or anything like that. It was because they didn't have enough numbers to open up the lodge from time to time. Yeah, and not enough brothers would come in to visit. They'd be able to open up the lodge.
That's another warning sign there, right? Okay.
Yeah. And the person who sponsored me wound up becoming the master of the lodge, and he put fire under them, and they got brothers to come and open up from different lodges, that sister lodges, because they had a lot of lodges.
Yep.
In the jurisdiction. They have plenty. A lot in the city and a lot up here, upstate New York, you know.
Gotcha.
Where I was in Newburgh, New York.
Okay.
And so they were able to get brothers from the sister lodges to come to open up and give me the second. And then I would say about 5 months later, I received my third degree. And it was no proficiency tests, as long as I had the money to pay.
Gotcha. So within 2 years, let's say, give or take, you were able to be fulfilled and became a Master Mason. I'm just curious because other brothers I've talked to that have gone through this experience where they do follow the Duncan ritual, for lack of a better term. So they're entered apprentices, they're fellow craft, they're Master Mason, and then the Blue Lodge, which most of us would know as regular upright Masons, that's where it ends after the third degree. And if you want to seek other light in Masonry, you affiliate with the other bodies. Did this particular lodge continue to issue or make degrees available to you?
Yes. You know, it was weird because I thought I was able to go to any Scottish Rite body.
Yeah.
Okay. But I didn't. They said, you know, to take this petition if you want to go into the Scottish Rite. They only offered one rite, was the Scottish Rite. There was no such thing as a Scottish or a York Rite that they could offer you. However, when I went through the Scottish Rite with them, I went through the 4 to 14th degree. So there was the Lodge of Perfection they gave me. The next thing after that was Royal Arch. And I'm studying and I'm like, no, that's York Rite. And then after the Royal Arch, then there was Knights Templar. Then after that was Consistory. So then they go back into the Scottish Rite. Then after that, you can't get your 33rd degree until you become a Shriner.
It's interesting in the clandestine lodges that the highest degree or title or what honor, I guess you could ever get, is a Shriner.
Yes.
After you become a Master Mason, there's, you know, the York Rite, there's the Scottish Rite and the Shrine, and you can join all of them, none of them, or whichever you want to choose in any order that you want to do it almost. So I've always found that interesting. At least they tip of the fez to the Shrine. They hold that to be pretty high. But I'm going to guess that their Shrine organization is not affiliated with the Shriners that we know as with the Children's Hospital and all the fundraising.
Correct. That's correct. From what I know,
did you get that far in the Shrine, or did you at this point realize?
No, at that point, when I got to the 4 to 14th degree with them, and I invested in another apron, another hat, and all kinds of stuff, I was starting already to kind of already know something's awry.
Gotcha.
You know, something's happening here. And
that's kind of unfortunate where other brothers I've spoken to that have been, you know, in the same situation, they realize that this version of Freemasonry that you're talking about, and we'll just refer to it as clandestine Masonry, is that it's more of almost, and I just want to be careful not to, you know, put myself out there in a position, but it's almost a fundraiser. It's almost you know, we would look at it and go, that's kind of a pyramid scheme where you're asked to go ask people that you know in the community to buy tickets for a lodge fundraiser, and the money doesn't really go to the lodge. You find out that it goes to the people, the leadership that's running the organization.
Yeah. Once I got to the Lodge of Perfection, they gave me a bunch of tickets.
Right.
Raffle tickets that I had to sell. Then after a while, you end up purchasing them because you're not going to keep bothering every few months. You know,
I've heard that. And it's interesting because as Master Masons are like, oh man, I got to pay my lodge dues. And it's anywhere from $100 to $150, sometimes it's $200 to be a member of a lodge. But that's a one-time thing you pay, which when I hear brothers complain about that, I'm like, have you ever talked to a brother that's been in a clandestine lodge? Like, that's what they were generating in a week at some points.
Well, I was paying $300 a year after everything.
And buying all of your own materials.
Yep. I never have received a Bible from them. I had to buy that myself from McCoy's. I never received, my patent, I still had to like track them down to get that and add extra cost for that. It was just, oh my goodness. The cost just kept adding up. I became the master of the lodge. I had to pay $25 extra tax for that.
Wow.
I had to pay a burial tax, a sermon tax, temple tax, all that at the end of the year. So even if I paid my dues to the lodge, all of a sudden I would get this invoice from the Grand Lodge that I owe the Grand Lodge $25 to be the master of the lodge. And if I'm the past master, I owe that still, because now it becomes past master dues. And then you had to buy a dance ticket for the end of the year dance. You had to buy that. And they gave you one, so you had to buy another one off of a brother if you want to bring your lady.
Well, that was very nice of them to give you that. You did 2 years to get to the master portion, and then the door was open to more degrees that you could take through this organization. I didn't know that you had worked your way through the chairs, so to speak, of this lodge. How long were you a member of this clandestine lodge?
Oh, I went through the chairs rather quickly. The first thing I was a Tyler. Okay, they right at the back they made me a Tyler. Didn't have enough brothers. And as we did the opening, I'll be outside, and then they opened the lodge. They would let me come inside. Meeting, business as usual. Read the minutes, everything. Then before I know it, after that 1 year of being with them, I got elected to be junior warden.
Wow. Okay. That's a massive jump. Yeah.
Yeah. Right away. Yeah. They said you're really sharp. You know what you're talking about. I asked a bunch of questions. And, I'm asking about Albert Pike, Manly P. Hall. I'm doing my reading, and they're like, oh, wow, this kid, we got to get him in there. And I didn't even make senior warden. They went from junior warden. They nominated me to be master of the lodge. So I didn't get to actually go through the stations, the chairs, and nothing.
I want to get back to this other really important point. When it comes to Masonic education, what were the programs in the meeting like, or the discussions? Was there anything that was Masonic that was discussed at all?
You had to bring it up, because otherwise they'll sit there and talk about tables and chairs that they needed to do and rentals they needed to. It was just stuff like that. You had to really, if you wanted the education, you had to be the one to bring it up, and you wasn't allowed to really give a 5-10 minute lecture without someone hissing or sighing really loud. They really didn't want to hear it.
So what I find interesting, Brother Eddie, is like looking back on this experience and just really getting a chance to meet you as we're recording this episode. We've exchanged emails and text messages, which has been awesome. But, I'm sitting here going, wow, here is a potential candidate and then a brother who comes through the lodge. And you're the kind of Mason that I would want to have in a lodge, because you're asking the questions, you're seeking that light. And that brings a certain energy with it for the rest of us to like be excited and want to talk about things. And it must have been so difficult for them because they don't do that. They don't specialize in that. They don't provide that. And to have someone come and talk to them about books or esoteric thought that they don't go through. I mean, obviously, if you're in a degree where people are still reading the ritual from the pages of a book, they don't know the words. They don't understand the words. Mm-hmm. And here's this young guy asking all those questions. At what point did you start to go, this isn't Freemasonry, or maybe this isn't for me? When did you start questioning things?
I would say very quickly after I started to actually go to meetings and really see what was going on. I wasn't getting what I wanted, and it was just money, 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 money.
Mm.
All they ever talked about was dues and who owes, and
Gotcha.
it was just all about money. Getting the rentals, and so I realized, I said, wait a minute, I'm not getting this is not what I came for.
And to like your close friends and your loved ones, your family, your lady, you're telling them, hey, I'm going to lodge meetings. Was it 2 times a month? Couple times.
Once a month.
Once a month. Okay. So you're going to lodge, and I'm wearing this dark suit and tie or a tuxedo that I had to buy myself.
Yep.
And I'm following this thing, and they think that you are an upright man and Freemason as we would, determine it. But you had this question about this in the back of your mind. So I want to get to that day or that moment where you asked somebody, and the curtain was kind of opened up, and you realized that there was no Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, that you had been, for lack of a better term, played. And you can talk about this to whatever level you feel comfortable, but I'm just curious, like, what it must have been like to invest not only the money that you were putting into it, but the time and the trust that you had into this thing that you believed that it was what you thought it was.
I had met another brother from the New York Grand Lodge, from Compact Lodge, actually. And we had just met because we were going through a spiritual journey. We had met up at this place with this guy was taking us through a different sort of religious journey. We were going to what we call ATRs, or African Traditional Religions. If you ever heard of Santeria or Palo Mayombe, these things, we were both interested in that. And we kind of met by chance at this guy's house. And he said, hey, I have another Mason that's coming over that wants to join the house. Okay, great. And we're there talking, and I told him my lodge, and it never came, never heard of it. And and never heard of the Grand Lodge, and it kind of sealed the deal for me. And I was like, and I mean, I tell you, it was like if my head was an egg and it cracked open.
Gotcha.
And all this light just came to me like at one shot, and it was like you kind of knew this was coming. You kind of had an idea that this was coming. You were wrestling. I was wrestling with it at night when I would go to meetings, or when I would go to Grand Lodge quarterlies. I'm wrestling with it because we're meeting in different places. All of a sudden, we don't have our own Grand Lodge building. We're renting space at another Grand Lodge or in the basement of a church. And I'm like, come on, these guys don't have their stuff together here. This can't be real. And just him saying, I never heard of that lodge, and that Grand Lodge is unrecognized. I've never heard of that Grand Lodge. It was hurt. I was really hurt.
Any man that's listening, it's like finding out that your partner is not being true to you, is not being faithful to you.
Exactly.
Just tears your heart out.
Yeah. Because these were people that I trusted and that I thought I grew with.
Right.
I made some bonds here with some people, and they knew. They were old enough. They knew. And they played the division card.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because you and I had kind of bonded over this thing where doing the research in clandestine masonry, having been a member of the Old 17th in upstate New York, a lot of our lodges are predominantly white. I mean, we are diverse with our thought and our membership, but not to the scale of what you would see in a metropolitan area like New York City. It's a shock when I come across brothers, and it seems to be young men of color who in their heart are just like you and I. They're seeking this honor to become a Freemason, just as we say in the degrees. And they don't know, and they stumble across this clandestine group that is going to offer them this promise of what they're looking for, and they jump on it. And it's just a very unfortunate part of, as you say, the divisions that we have. And unfortunately, there is a racial component that goes into this. And I don't know how we can really solve that problem.
That is that's a big problem. And it needs patience on both sides. It's sort of like, I'm blessed enough to where I was part of a compact lodge that I didn't see that. There was people from all cultures and background. Everyone there was really interested in the difference and learning, meeting someone and learning their culture and learning all about them as much as we can. But I do understand that in the more rural lodges and stuff like that, you don't have that, and that's not there. So it can be uncomfortable at times for both sides. A brother coming in and, he sees a lot of faces that doesn't look like his. So, it's uncomfortable for him, and it's uncomfortable, for the brother that's never had that, never sat in the lodge, with someone that was different.
And I think the other part is that the facts are what they are. It's that we have a lot of, clandestine brothers or brothers of irregular lodges or not recognized lodges, and they all tend to be from the same ethnic background. And it's something that I think we should start considering in, I know diversity and inclusion is a big movement right now in corporate America, but it's something that we have to start looking at in our lodges and finding a way to be inviting and opening to welcoming these men in. If they, like yourself, have had that moment where they looked at the man in the mirror and the truth was revealed and they're like, okay, I just realized that the last 3 years, 4 or 5 years of my life have been following something that's not true. And I want to find that real thing. And I think that that's where, if there's a chance for quote unquote a rebound in, regular Masonry is that's our greatest opportunity, is to really show that brotherly love that we profess, is that when these men are coming in, they're coming from a good place in their heart. They're not coming to corrupt or pollute the wonderful craft that we have.
Exactly. And what took me so long to actually come and get healed was the fact that I felt that I would be looked down on. That, hey, you were clandestine. You sort of was a Cowan. Yep. To say the least,
Yep.
You kind of felt like that, and you kind of felt like, you did something wrong. And it does take, a very long time to sort of say, okay, if this is what I really want, then I need to fix this. You
had the revelation, and you were fortunate. We've had several brothers from Compact Lodge, from Milos, the current worshipful master, to Brother Millar, who's just a great brother that contributes on the esoteric level with his. I wonder if that's the person you met with all these big thoughts and big ideas, because that's a guy that'll help you out.
I definitely met him a few times.
You come to Compact Lodge, and this is one area that I'm not really very clear on, so I'm hoping maybe you can help me out. Is what is that discussion like when you meet with the leadership of a regular and recognized Masonic Lodge? Where do they pick up with you? Do you start all over as a first degree blind initiate? Well, when I met with the leadership, and it was actually at my investigation when they came to the house, and they told me that I will have to start all over again. That we understand that you're the master of the lodge and you're at this clandestine lodge, but it's not recognized. Your first, second, third degree is not recognized. You would have to start all over again. Are you okay with that? And I said, yeah, definitely. Okay.
Because it wasn't real. I didn't feel it was real. So I wanted that experience. In some weird way, though, that you do kind of benefit because some of the secrets of the degree you're aware of, that you've gone through it. Some of the ritual, the words that we use, you're kind of familiar with it. But for somebody like you that was looking for that challenge of the memorization and the really the mastery, the proficiency in the work, you get that now. Exactly. And that was a big deal for me. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience. Definitely was. After the first degree that night, one of the brothers came up to me and said, hey, now, was it the same as in your clandestine group, what you went through? I said it was similar in some ways, but it was much better tonight. Oh, cool. Very cool. Yeah, it was much better. I mean, everything was there. Everything that I expected, everything that I thought that I should feel, or how it should go, it went perfectly. I'm just curious, did you have any doubts that maybe you had made the same mistake again? No. Only because I actually met these people we've hung out. It was a long time before they gave me a petition to even join the lodge. They didn't just give it to me just because I'm trying to get healed. Or no, they said,
Right.
you know, they talked to me. We went out a few times. It felt like I was actually a part of the lodge in a way, because, you know, I met every time they met, we were there. You know, I brought another brother with me, you know, another young brother who we both realized together this was clandestine. I told him, I'm leaving. You want to come with me and get this fixed? And he said, sure. So he and we went through everything together. And, you know, I got to meet these people. I got to meet Compact. I got to know people, and I got to look into the lodge and, you know, such. And I saw that this was definitely legit.
So our podcast is open to anyone that subscribes to any podcast anywhere in the world. And I'm sure that we have a couple brothers who are listening now that maybe internally are asking these same questions that you asked before you joined a recognized lodge. What advice would you give them when it comes to seeking true Masonic light?
Be true to yourself. If you definitely and truly want this and you're questioning, is this real? Go and seek, search, ask the hard question, and accept the answer. And you can only be healed that way.
That's a good way of putting it. Now, you find yourself to be a traveling man, which is one of the promises we get as a Master Mason, is that you get that third degree and you can travel to any recognized lodge anywhere in the world. You're part of this, you know, international network of this fraternity. You've relocated for family and in your career. What are the steps that you have inside when it comes to now seeking a lodge that you would choose to want to affiliate with?
Well, I'm definitely going to be very careful. Definitely going to be very careful. I'm still in contact with Compact Lodge and the leadership there, and I'm also have the Amnesty app, which is a big help in finding recognized lodges out here. Fortunately, I do know a brother out here, and we're going to try to link up and go in that way. I'm telling you, it was very, very good to know that, hey, no matter where I go, I'm a Mason.
Yeah.
You know, and it just feels great to know that there's a brother here who's treated me like I'm blood.
Yep.
And we barely know each other. You know, everyone's trying to make me feel at home. And so once I get settled in, I'm gonna go with him and see, you know, what Utah has to offer me.
It was one of the things I was telling you before we started recording. I relocated to Maryland with my wife and over the summer, and still going to be a lifelong member of Mount Vernon Lodge, my home lodge in Albany. But here, there's such differences between the jurisdictions across the lines with how ritual, and it goes back to, you know, English Masonry and you know, the country and everything. It's so interesting. But one of the joys that I had was being investigated, because it's one of the things that when you do travel with other brothers that can vouch for you, that's not something that happens. But it's very easy. You could approach a lodge. If you have a dues card, they take you into another little room. They ask you some questions. You go through it. And I looked at it as a test that I was excited to take, because I had never really shown anyone who doesn't know me that I was proficient to be a Master Mason. And that... It was a test I knew I was going to pass, but it's the saying that we have, like, haven't been tried, never denied, ready to be tried again. I was ready for that moment.
Yeah.
Are you in the same spot?
I'm in the same spot because I feel, hey, I'm real, you know, and I appreciate it so much. And maybe I appreciate it more than someone that's never gone through that, because, you know, to feel that at one point, hey, I might not be recognized till... No, I'm recognized. I'm definitely, you know, I'm good. I'm ready for this test. This is a test that I know I'm going to pass. You know, I'm excited to take it as well. Yeah, definitely ready for that.
Well, I'm insanely jealous. Any lodge that gets your attention in Utah is going to be a better lodge with a brother like you that's going to come in with the talent that you're bringing in, the questions and the mind that you have to contribute in the meetings and just to what the lodge does and to the community. It's going to be great. So I wish you the best of luck with your new travels.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate that. That makes me feel really good.
This has been the Craftsmen Online Podcast. Again, I want to thank my guest this week for coming on, Brother Eddie Abdul. If Masonic education is important to you, you can sign up for our email newsletter at craftsmenonline.com. A reminder that new episodes of our podcast are available every Monday morning. Until next time, let peace and harmony prevail.